Mr. Harina, ikaw na ang host. Ready?
Sir, ako po magpe-present. Espina ho.
Ikaw muna. Sige.
Si Mr. Espina po magpe-present.
Pa-enable po ng screen
Oo.
sharing.
Mr. Emuel, gawin mong host si Mr. Spina.
Okay po, wait lang po. Okay na po.
Masishare mo yung screen mo?
Yes po, wait lang po.
Oo.
Kita na po ba?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're Group 6, and today we're presenting medical-legal issues in gender-based violence against women. I'm Alexander D. Espina Jr. My groupmates are Emil Nico, Harina, and Francine Daniel Pruga. But first, a prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Our topics to be discussed are number 1, definition, number 2, cases, number 3, role of forensics, number 4, medico-legal issues, number 5, laws, number 6, organizations. Starting with definition. Definition of medico-legal and gender-based violence. What is it? Term medico-legal refers to both medicine and law, and it can refer to two things. Number 1, the study and application of medical and scientific methods as evidence in a legal case. This is also referred to as legal medicine or medical jurisprudence. Number 2, medical law, the branch of law that governs proper medical practices. Gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is a phenomenon deeply rooted in gender inequality and continues to be one of the most notable human rights violations within all societies. Gender-based violence is violence directed against a person because of their gender. Both women and men experience gender-based violence, but the majority of victims are women and girls. Gender-based violence and violence against women are two terms that are often used interchangeably, as most violence against women is inflicted by men for gender-based reasons. The types of violence against women are, number 1, domestic violence, violence or other abuse that occurs in a domestic setting, such as in a marriage or cohabitation. Number 2, physical abuse, any intentional act causing injury, trauma, bodily harm, or any physical suffering to another person by way of bodily contact. Number 3, psychological abuse, any act which causes psychological harm to an individual. Number 4, economic abuse, any behavior that reduces, eliminates, or deprives a woman of her financial independence. So, to explain, domestic violence is the violence that occurs in marriage or in established relationships such as being lovers. Physical abuse is when a woman is abused using physical violence such as punching or hitting or kicking. Psychological abuse is the abuse that harms a woman's mental state such as cussing at them or verbally abusing them. Economic abuse is by harming a woman by stealing from them or making it so that their finances are interdependent upon a person that is trying to actively harm it. Number 5, social abuse. Isolating or alienating a woman from friends and family. Number 6, human trafficking. The trade of humans for the purpose of forced labor, sexual slavery, or commercial sexual exploitation. Number 7, sexual harassment. Any unwelcome range of actions with sexual overtones, including verbal transgressions. 8, femicide. Refers to the intentional murder of women because they are women, but may be defined more broadly to include any killings of women and girls. To explain again, 5, social abuse is to keep or to purposefully keep a woman from being able to interact with their families or their friends, such as close friends or even their mothers and fathers or siblings. Human trafficking is acts like prostitution, which are illegal, and sexual harassment is any action that without consent have sexual overtones. And femicide is the murder because of sexism. Gender-based violence is more common than you think. In the European Union, since the age of 15, 1 in 3 women has experienced physical and or sexual violence, 1 in 2 women has experienced sexual harassment, 1 in 20 women has been raped, and 1 in 5 women has experienced stalking. And 95% of victims trafficked for sexual exploitation in the EU are women. Despite the success of women's rights movement in highlighting the issue of violence against women, many countries have yet to implement the necessary criminal justice system reform to ensure that, at the very least, women can pursue redress through the criminal justice system. The effects of violence on health. Among victims of intimate partner violence, over 40% of women and nearly 15% of men report injuries, often of the head, neck, or face. Victims are also elevated risk of experiencing asthma, 23.7%, gastrointestinal disorders such as irritable bowel syndrome, 12.4%, frequent headaches, 28.7%, chronic pain, 29.8%, sexually transmitted infections, 4.3%, and activity limitations, 35%. Mental health outcomes include depression, anxiety, PTSD, suicidality, and chronic mental illness. Intimate partner violence affects both men and women, but women are more likely to experience severe victimization. Nationally representative data indicate that the share of women who report their physical or mental health is to be poor is 3 times higher among women with a history of intimate partner violence compared to those with no history of it. 6.4% versus 2.4% for poor physical health and 3.4% versus 1.1% for poor mental health. The largest differences in the prevalence of health outcomes for women who experience such violence compared to those who do not are in difficulty sleeping, 37.7% versus 21%, activity limitations, 35% versus 19.7%, chronic pain, 29.8 versus 16.5, and frequent headaches, 28.7 versus 16.5. Intimate partner violence affects both men and women, but women are more likely to experience severe victimizations that result in injury and the need for medical care. Health consequences may be related to the health-damaging behaviors that victims use to cope with the abuse, such as smoking and substance abuse, or sometimes even drinking. Furthermore, such violence reduces victims' ability to be economically independent, as it can lead to lost productivity, missed work or school, unemployment, and housing instability. The economic burden of intimate partner violence in the U.S. is estimated to be $3.6 trillion over victims' lifetimes, based on the 43 million adults affected by it, while the per victim lifetime cost is over $100,000 for women. Due to the long-term effects of violence, due to the high levels of stress that victims of domestic violence experience, survivors may end up facing serious health problems such as heart disease, chronic pain, asthma, and arthritis later in life. In addition to these serious physical problems, survivors may be faced with lasting reproductive health problems. One way that abusers exercise their control can include interfering with their victim's sexual health, also called reproductive coercion. This type of treatment can result in unwanted pregnancies or sexually transmitted infections, resulting in the woman trapped in the abusive relationship out of a sense of responsibility towards a child or have their reproductive system permanently damaged through the sexual abuse. A survivor's case may fall under different categories of violations, types of harms, and strategies. Online gender-based violence can have serious consequences, ranging from psychological distress and negative health impacts to the survivors. Most of them have suffered emotional and sexual harms, on top of having their reputations damaged for disclosing their cases. These harms were aggravated by the lack of support they receive, which often includes discouragement to socialize and get involved on both online and offline spheres. Women also confront the terms that they have lost their privacy now that their personal and sensitive information were leaked online, redistributed, and used against them. Violations occur in different platforms, and these were perpetrated through mobile phones, Meta's products, and services like Facebook and Messenger, followed by video, webcams, laptop, and even porn sites. Majority of the survivors have sought assistance from the law enforcement authority. Their cases were investigated and have been brought to trial. Some survivors sought help from state offices for psychosocial intervention. Other strategies include reporting abuse to the platform, leaving and or changing the platform, blocking the aggressor on the said platform or device, and having a dialogue or confrontation with the offender. A medico-legal definition of femicide. Femicide refers to the extreme form of violence against women, against someone belonging to the female gender, i.e. the killing of women. Research shows that to date, gender-based violence remains a largely hidden phenomenon, with prevalence often being underestimated by official statistics and data missing in numerous countries. It can be argued that the underreporting may be suggestive of a legislative lapse that needs addressing. Sexual assault is a common, widespread, and insidious problem that has a serious physical, psychological, emotional, and social consequences. In most regions, rape myths, which are a product of patriarchal attitudes, have shaped the ways in which women have been treated by health services, police, the judiciary, and in law. As a result, victims may have frequently chosen not to report their assault or have been filtered out of criminal justice systems, resulting in low charge laying/filing and conviction rates. In many instances, the collection of medical legal evidence, often demanded in the law or policy for corroborative purposes, has been inconsistent, severely limited in quality and scope, or not undertaken. Number 2. Cases of gender-based violence against women. The Media Report on Online Gender-Based Violence in the Philippines from January 1 to June 30, 2022. The Internet is one of the most powerful and enabling platforms for opportunity, sharing ideas and building community. But women and other vulnerable groups are too often threatened, silenced, and censored because of having the courage to speak out. Since 2012, the Foundation for Media Alternatives has been monitoring and documenting cases of online gender-based violence in the Philippines through the Take Back the Tech mapping platform. Over the years, the FMA has observed a growing incidence of gender-based violence, how it has taken on new forms, occurring in the context of modern and digital society. From 2012 up to June 30, 2022, FMA has mapped 628 cases of online gender-based violence in the Philippines, most sourced from media reports. In the first 6 months of 2022, new figures were recorded in an online reporting platform with 30 media source reports of online gender-based violence. Most of the mapped reports has happened in the National Capital Region, Visayas Region, Central and South Luzon, Mindanao Region, and one Filipino case documented in Singapore. Survivors aged 30 and below are more likely to experience online gender-based violence. The majority reported that they suffered online harassment and abuse in a form of taking intimate photos, videos, and other private information, inciting violent remarks, abusive comments, online sexual exploitation and abuse of children, non-consensual distribution, and other forms of technology-facilitated different actors. As you can see from this report, there are 30 reports mapped from January 1 to June 29. The most common OGBV is the unauthorized sharing and dissemination of private information. threats of violence and or blackmail, and taking photos and videos without consent. Other violations are deleting, changing, or faking personal data, repeated harassment, and abusive comments. The most common devices used are mobile phones, Facebook/Messenger, video, webcams, laptop, and porn sites. The locations are National Capital Region, which have 10 reports, Visayas Region, with 7 reports, Central and South Luzon also have 7 reports, Mindanao with 5 reports, and 1 report in Singapore. The ages vary between under 18 to 60, with 18 to 30 having 5 cases, 31 to 45 having 5 cases also, 46 to 60 years old having 3, and 18 years old having 9. The relationships of a perpetrator to the survivors are often people unknown having 16 cases, or people known having 16 cases, people unknown having 10 cases, groups of people, 6 cases, and the internet platform itself being 1 case and the state having 2. Most of the harms include physical, having 9 cases, emotional 25, sexual 15, harm to reputation 12, loss of identity and property 1, mobility 1, invasion of privacy 7. And the strategies are reporting to the police, investigation, dialogue, blocking, and reporting the abuse. The cases that may fall under medical legal cases are injuries due to battery, injuries that have a likelihood of death, injuries due to accidents which can be industrial, vehicular, or others, injuries due to firearms, suspected or evident suicides or homicides, which also include attempts, suspected or evident poisoning or intoxication, cases referred from courts or otherwise in order to determine the age, burns, electrical or chemical injuries, death by an animal bite, unnatural deaths. Patient is a person in judicial or police custody. A patient who is unconscious or in a coma where the cause has not been found, asphyxia due to hanging, strangling, drowning or suffocation, suspected or evident sexual assault, suspected or evident criminal abortion, suspected domestic violence and child abuse, the sudden death of a patient on the operation table or after parental administration of a drug or medication, person brought dead where there is improper history.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Efrancine Daniel Ruga, and I will be reporting about the role of forensic evidence and medical-legal issues in cases of gender-based violence against women. So first, I will be talking about the role of forensic evidence in cases of gender-based violence against women. So next, please. Let me first define what a forensic medical exam is, where it is performed, and who provided. So a forensic medical exam addresses victims' health concern related to a sexual assault and to collect and preserve forensic evidence. While most local health providers are able to provide general medical care, not just anyone can conduct a sexual assault forensic medical exam. So, kailangan may proper knowledge ka muna on how to collect the forensic evidence because usually sa mga cases na ganito, the evidence are really time sensitive. And then, sexual assault forensic medical examinations are typically performed at hospitals rather than other healthcare sites, such as a physician's office, clinic, or a campus health center. So, bakit? Because hospitals, kailangan mo na meron kang proper resources to conduct the examination. Next po. The examination is conducted by a healthcare provider, ideally one who has a specialized education and clinical experience in the treatment of sexual assault patients and the collection of forensic evidence. As a part of post-exam duties, when the criminal justice system is involved, this healthcare provider may also be called on to interpret, analyze, and present exam findings and provide factual and/or expert opinion related to the examination. So, kaya nga dapat professional yung magkakandak ng examination kasi later, pwede siya maging expert witness. Kaya din professional, so the examination is efficient and it is reliable. Next po, please. So, forensic examiners can use DNA evidence from a crime like sexual assault, which are collected from the crime scene, but it can also be collected from your body, clothes, and other personal belongings. You may choose to have a sexual assault forensic exam, sometimes known as a rape kit, to preserve possible DNA evidence and receive important medical care. You don't have to report the crime to have an exam, but the process gives you the chance to safely store evidence should you decide to report a later crime. So, meron lang po akong ikikwento na isang case sa Forensic Files, isang siyang episode na napanood ko. And yung victim, nakiklaim siya na siya ay sinidate and sexually assault siya ng kanyang doctor. So, since masyado pa siyang dizzy nung night na yon, nagstay muna siya sa hospital and then later, nagpa-test siya sa isang rape clinic. So, according sa test, meron ngang presence ng semen sa kanyang undies, pants, and ganoon na rin sa vaginal swab na ginawa sa kanya. So, since inaakusahan yung doktor, naging willing yung doktor na kuhanan siya ng dugo for DNA testing. And the result demonstrated na innocent yung doctor. Pero yung victim, she was really insistent na she was sexually assaulted. So once again, the doctor agreed na magpa-test ulit. And once again, ganun pa rin yung result. Innocent pa rin siya. And then after years, actually, nasarado yung case. Pero talagang matyaga yung patient, and she was really, really insistent na she was sexually assaulted. So nag-hire siya ng PI, and this PI nag-probe siya doon sa car ng doktor. And nakakuha siya ng chopstick, yung lip balm. And then pinatest niya ito sa isang private clinic. And bale doon sa lip balm, nakakuha ng epithelial tissues or cells, and then nag-test yon for DNA testing. And naging match yung DNA sa lip balm doon sa DNA na nakuha sa rape kit years prior. So the mystery is paano na naging magkatulad yung DNA doon sa chopstick at doon sa semen kung iba yung DNA na galing sa dugo ng doktor. So baka isipin nyo, iba't iba yung nag-assault doon sa victim. So dahil nga medyo na pressure na yung mga forensic group doon sa lugar na yon, nagpa-unlock ulit yung doktor na magpa-DNA test. And then this time, parang iba na yung dugo ng doktor. Napansin nung kumuha ng dugo na parang medyo malapot siya, tapos iba yung kulay. So, yung explanation pala nun is yung doktor, nag-insert siya ng plastic tube sa kanyang arm at pinuno niya yon ng dugo ng isa sa kanyang mga pasyente. At yung natitest na dugo years prior is hindi sa kanya. So, actually, siya talaga yung nag-sexually assault doon sa victim. Kaya kailangan talaga na maging mapanuri yung mga forensic exam, magkakandak ng forensic exams. Next. So when law enforcement investigates a case of sexual violence, DNA evidence can make or break the outcome. DNA evidence has become a routine part of investigating and prosecuting all types of crimes. It is often an important tool in achieving justice for survivors of sexual assault. Next, please. So here is the role of forensic evidence in cases of sexual violence. The prosecutor must prove some penetration, however slight, of the vagina or anus by a penis or another object, or the penetration of the mouth by a penis. Second, the prosecutor must prove that such penetration occurred without the consent of the victim, against her will, or that she lacked the capacity to consent. Finally, the prosecutor must prove the identity of the perpetrator. Next, please. Forensic evidence addresses these three elements in the prosecution of cases of sexual violence. So the forensic evidence can offer evidence as to whether the complaint of act occurred, i.e. was the woman vaginally, anally, or orally penetrated, and by what? It can support allegations that the perpetrator used force, and finally, it can address the identity of the perpetrator. Next po. So, evidence collection. Many variables affect the relevance of certain types of evidence in a particular case, including whether an assault was committed by a stranger, a known offender who claims no sexual contact with the victim, or a known offender who claims the victim consented to the contact. All available evidence is important, not just DNA evidence. Next. The examiner collects the following as relevant to each case and based on jurisdictional policies: clothing evidence, debris, example, dirt, leaves, fibers, hair, fingernail, swabs, foreign materials and swabs, for example, bite marks, and from the surface of the body. Other evidence are hair combings, oral and genital swabs and smears, known blood or saliva sample or buccal swab for DNA analysis and comparison, and toxicology samples and documentation of evidence. Next, please. So now we will come to the issues, the medical legal issues and gender-based violence against women. Next, please. So, dito po sa part na to, nag-rely ako sa isang study that was conducted by the Women's Rights Division of the WHO and the Human Rights Watch. So, in a study conducted by the Human Rights Watch, they found that there is very little coordination between law enforcement agencies, the criminal justice system, and the health sector in most countries. So, isa na nga sa issue kung bakit hindi ma-achieve ng mga victims yung redness sa criminal justice system is walang coordination between the police, justice, and health sector. So, furthermore, studies conducted by they found that there is Furthermore, studies conducted by researchers working in the public health sector that confirmed the claims made by activists about the extent of sexual and gender-based violence against women have failed to shake the bias against women demonstrated by many police and justice officials who persist in their belief that women lie about or exaggerate the extent of the violence. So yan nga yung problema ngayon. I mean, matagal naman na siyang problema na hindi talaga tayo yung mga victims, hindi pinaniniwalaan na sila ay na-assault dahil nga merong bias talaga sa ating justice system. Next, even within the health sector, Human Rights Watch identified the failure of the public health sector with its understanding of the sexual and gender-based violence to coordinate effectively with the medico-legal sector. As a result, women are often traumatized by how the forensic exam is conducted. So some women report that forensic examiners failed to explain that the exam would entail and were rough in how they conducted the exam. In fact, some women reported that the forensic exam felt like another form of sexual assault, sexual violence. Next, please. So here is another issue: ideological, institutional, and resource barriers in law enforcement. Number 1, letter A, police as gatekeepers. It is virtually impossible for a woman who has been the victim of sexual or gender-based violence to achieve redress through the criminal justice system unless she can first get the police to take her report of the crime. However, Human Rights Watch documented numerous reports of the refusal of police to register complaints made by women. So, for example, in Brazil, after the creation of women's delegacies, the reporting of rape and other crimes of sexual violence increased dramatically. Activists who trained police learned that it was not enough to train just the officers who would take or investigate the report, but also the officers who literally sit behind the desk at the front of the police stations. So, dapat yung mga nandoon sa ating naka-duty sa desk is dapat open din sila sa mga victims na pupunta sa police station So these police officers function as gatekeepers and, if untrained, may send women away or otherwise discourage them from making a report rather than sending them to the appropriate person to make the complaint. So kailangan talaga na matrain sila to trust the victims or else they will discourage them. And hindi na masosolve yung assault. So next po. Next is the mistreatment and bias. Unfortunately, many women suffer more than simple rejection from the police. So the police sometimes subject women who report crimes of sexual and gender-based violence to harassment, intimidation, or abuse. This is particularly true in countries in which women are considered suspect simply because they report being raped. Human Rights Watch interviewed women who reported rapes to the police and then were subjected to intimidation and threats by the police in Pakistan. In an early report on police abuse in Pakistan, Human Rights Watch cited a report by the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan that more than 70% of women in police custody reported being subjected to physical or sexual abuse. Human Rights Watch further noted that when Pakistan implemented the Hudud ordinances, which discriminate on the basis of gender, the number of women in custody in Pakistan rose sharply. One of the ramifications of the Hudud, I don't know how to pronounce that, ordinances is that a woman who alleges rape and then fails to prove the rape happened can then be charged with fornication or adultery and be sentenced to prison. So in every country in which we conducted Human Rights Watch conducted research, they talked to women who were reportedly told by the police that they should not pursue pressing charges because the perpetrators were police officers. And they were warned that the women, they were told that their identity would be exposed to the public, and they were told that they would bring about dishonor on themselves and their families. In countries in which women may be killed in the name of honor, this latter point could have a significant chilling impact on women's willingness to report sexual violence or to pursue charges against the perpetrator. Next, please. Failure to investigate. Human Rights Watch documented persistent patterns of non-existent or sloppy investigations by the police. So in instances, it seemed that the police were deliberately sabotaging the investigation. A 1996 study of police response to sexual violence in Peru found that in 45% of the cases, the police did not even go to the crime scene. So imagine that. Paano masosolve yung crime kung mismo yung mga police hindi pumunta sa crime scene? In other cases naman, the police would fail to follow leads or thoroughly investigate the crime scene or refer women to get forensic evidence examinations in a timely manner. So, as nasabi ko nga kanina, during rape or in cases like this, very time-sensitive yung mga evidence. So, kailangan talaga na timely manner din yung pag-follow up mo sa mga leads. In some cases, corruption seemed to be the motivating factor behind police inaction. Corrupt police could either demand that the witness or her family pay a bribe before taking action or accept a bribe from the accused in exchange for agreeing not to pursue the investigation. In other cases, it appears that racism and other biases influence the decision of police whether or not to investigate. So, ganyan, madaming cases po na ganyan sa Amerika, sa USA. Activists in South Africa explained that when a white woman files a report of rape, her claim is taken seriously and thoroughly investigated. But when a black woman reports the rape, her case may be ignored. So, meron pa rin talagang barrier sa mga race. Police also refuse to take reports of sexual violence from prostitutes or reports in which another police officer is named as the perpetrator. So, kasi nga, yung mga biases, minsan binuview nila ng mga police yung mga prostitutes na madudumi na sila or the like. So, parang they would not waste their time na to conduct any investigation. And that is very unfair kasi nasa right natin na tulungan tayo ng justice system. Finally, when police did identify and arrest a suspect in a case of sexual violence, they did not collect evidence from the body and clothing of the suspect. Such an examination would have to be undertaken only in a manner consistent with the rights of the accused. However, given a probable cause, such an examination may be warranted and could be legally conducted. A forensic examination of the suspect should mirror the examination given to the victim. The suspect's body should be examined for body fluids and any evidence or injuries that he may have suffered if the victim physically resisted the attack. The nature and extent of such injuries should be carefully documented as they may corroborate the victim's account of the attack. Next, please. Pressure for offender or victim reconciliation. Because crimes of sexual and gender-based violence have been routinely perceived as private crimes, police officers may push for a mediated resolution to the complaint. Until April 1997, a man who raped a woman in Peru and then agreed to marry her would not be charged with the crime. In many cases, the women were not consulted in this arrangement. Women who report marital rape are particularly vulnerable to being forced to accept a mediated solution by the police. Also, in many countries, marital rape is not a recognized crime. These mediated solutions virtually never provide for holding the perpetrator accountable for future violence or setting up any mechanism to protect the woman from further harm. Next. Rudimentary follow-up of forensic evidence. In most countries, the police are responsible for ensuring that women are sent for a forensic medical exam for the collection of evidence and assessment of injuries. In some cases, the police must provide the woman with a form so that she can get an appointment. In other cases, the police are to provide transport for the woman to the examination place. The police rarely inform women of the importance of this step. They sometimes refuse to take reports from women until they have received the medico-legal report confirming the rape. Thus, if women fail to get their forensic exam in a timely manner, or if the examiner does not find evidence, either because there is no evidence or the examiner failed to find the evidence, the police will not investigate a complaint. Thus, even if there was an eyewitness of the perpetrator told another person that he committed the rape, the police will treat the lack of forensic exam as a bar to further investigation of the reported crime. In some cases, the police delay the referral, making it less likely that there will be evidence of the assault and the use of the lack of evidence as a justification for not investigating the complaint. In countries where the police are to provide transport to the medical facility, they sometimes outright refuse to provide the transportation or demand the woman pay for the transportation or otherwise demand a bribe. Next, please. So next is the ideological, institutional, and resource barriers in the health sector. Forensic evidence in cases of sexual violence can help establish that the act did occur, provide evidence of the identity of the perpetrator, and corroborate the victim's story of when, where, and how the attack occurred. The presence of semen strongly supports a woman's claim of rape, although it does not address the issue of consent. Bruising, vaginal or anal tearing, striations from being choked, and other evidence of force may be used to support a claim of use of force. Although there will not be physical evidence of the use of threats, there may be psychological evidence to support the claim. So, dito po sa health sector, the Human Rights Watch identified these issues. Number one is mistreatment and bias. So, in some cases, the examiners fail to respect the women's privacy. For example, asking them to strip naked but failing to give them a gown or cover them with a sheet. In some cases naman, examiners would allow others to watch the examination without getting the woman's consent. Next, please. The focus on virginity. Many of the forensic examiners focus on the condition of the hymen, often to the exclusion of all other evidence. This focus on the hymen per se has no legal or medical basis. It is one of two tests conducted by doctors to establish whether the woman is a virgin or habituated to intercourse. The second test is the finger test, in which the examiner measures the elasticity of the woman's vagina. Neither the state of a woman's hymen nor the result of the finger test are definitive in answering the question of whether an individual was raped. The focus on virginity also means that many forensic doctors treat the exam as solely as a gynecological exam and fail to document other evidence or form or violence. Next. Next is incomplete and incorrect forensic medical exams. So, forensic examiners failed to conduct a preliminary interview with the victim to ascertain the nature of the alleged crimes that would allow the examiner to conduct the appropriate tests and make decision about what type of evidence might be available. Forensic examiners often lack training in appropriate and effective techniques for the collection of evidence in cases of sexual assault or domestic violence. In rape cases, examiners routinely employ medically groundless tests, such as virginity exams, while failing to collect evidence of non-consensual intercourse or evidence that could help to establish the identity of the perpetrator. In many cases, they are insensitive to victims' trauma, fail to explain the nature or purpose of the exams they're conducting, fail to get the victim's informed consent to conduct tests and collect evidence, allow outside observers to attend examination without getting the victim's permission, and fail to provide treatment for injuries the victims have sustained. Next. Absence of follow-up, particularly health and counseling. So, Human Rights Watch repeatedly found systems in which the medical response to sexual violence was bifurcated, i.e., a woman would go first to a forensic evidence exam and then to a medical clinic for treatment. This process raises issues of medical ethics, namely, should the state support a system in which a trained health professional failed to provide medical treatment to a patient? This is particularly critical in cases in which a woman may not have obvious injuries and may be unaware of the importance of being checked for internal injuries and receiving information about pregnancy or the risk of contracting sexually transmitted diseases as a result of rape. On a more practical level, this split in the system effectively discourages women from seeking the evidentiary exam. Next, please. Next is refusal to testify or inadequate testimony. Although Human Rights Watch did not document patterns of forensic examiners refusing to testify in court, the significant flaws in the system of collecting evidence, analyzing the evidence, and protecting the chain of custody means that most examiners fail to provide adequate testimony in court. In many cases, forensic doctors lacked training regarding the terminology, significance, and appropriate courtroom use of forensic medical evidence. This reduces the usefulness of the records they make. Not only is information that is probative often missing from the report, but also information that is irrelevant but potentially prejudicial to the victim is included in the report. Furthermore, forensic doctors do not understand the importance of ensuring the chain of custody of the evidence to prevent any possibility of it being tampered with. Next. Next is the ideological, institutional, and resource barriers in the justice system. Letter A, training on use of forensic evidence. So many prosecutors lack training in how to present forensic evidence in legal proceedings. One of the most glaring errors is when prosecutors ask forensic examiners to present legal conclusions. Was the victim raped? Or as opposed to findings of fact that would support or refute the legal conclusions. Like forensic doctors, many prosecutors share misinformation with regard to the importance of the woman's virginity and the condition of her hymen in determining whether she was raped. The testimony of the forensic evidence examiner creates an opportunity for the prosecution to recreate the crime so that the judge and jury understand the seriousness of crimes of sexual violence, yet most prosecutors fail to use this opportunity. Next, bias and mistreatment. Bias against women influences the objectivity of proceedings in the criminal justice system. Entrenched prejudices and the belief that women can't be raped or that women lie about rape and domestic abuse for their own ends severely hamper women's ability to receive a fair hearing in court procedures. A prosecutor in Lahore, Pakistan, told Human Rights Watch, "Our researchers, I don't believe in rape cases. Women's consent is always there. If rape exists, it happens in only 1% of cases. For example, women may be raped during an ambush, but that is extremely rare. Our society does not allow rape." Another prosecutor in Karachi referred to victims of sexual assault as women who were no better than prostitutes. In South Africa, courts applied the cautionary rule in rape cases. The cautionary rule requires the court to exercise additional care when assessing the credibility of a rape victim. The application of this rule in rape cases is based on the belief that women suffer hysteria that can cause a neurotic victim to imagine things that did not happen, and despite sexual frustration and other unpredictable emotional causes. So imagine na ganun yung criminal justice natin. Paano naman yung mga victims? Since kung lalapit sila sa mga officials, meron na agad sa ulo ng mga officials na, ay, dito nagsasabi ng totoo. So, paano sila makakakuha ng tulong na deserve nila? Next. Next, please. Discriminatory legislation. So, dapat yung criminal code and rules of... Babalik po sa letter C. Thank you. And evidence should be reviewed to identify and repeal laws that discriminate against women. Next. Letter... Yes, thank you. Nature of necessary links between health, police, and justice sectors. All three of these sectors must be educated in what constitutes an appropriate, rights-based response to sexual and gender-based violence against women. Each system must engage in self-scrutiny to identify and eliminate obstacles women face when seeking redress and treatment. This scrutiny must include looking at attitudinal as well as instructional bias against women. Furthermore, the work of the public health sector and violence against women could be used to help counter perceptions within the law enforcement and criminal justice sectors that the violence is not serious, that it is rare, that women are inherently less credible than men, and that women lie about their experiences of sexual and gender-based violence. Next. So I think this is the last issue, and it is the issue of resources. So in some states, forensic examiners are unable to conduct appropriate examination because of a lack of resources. In the worst cases, there was insufficient lighting in the examination room. Imagine that. Examiners not have the equipment to collect the evidence. For example, no swabs for collecting semen from the vagina, rectum, or mouth. Examiners did not have any kit in which to store the collected evidence in such a way that would protect it from being tampered with or otherwise compromised. Even more disturbing was the lack of sterile equipment and gloves for conducting the examination. Next, please. Next po. In Pakistan, women were either subjected to examinations by a forensic examiner wearing used gloves that had been rinsed with water since the previous use, or were told they must pay for a new glove. In some cases, in part because of the issue of resources, women do not have access to timely forensic exams because the state only supports the training and employment of a small number of forensic examiners. In Peru, the physicians who work for the Institute of Legal Medicine, or the IML, are all located in either Lima or provincial capitals, making it impossible for many women to get the required exam. So, ito po yung mga issue na kinakaharap ng mga victims ng gender-based violence. So, prior po dito sa report na ginawa namin, I wasn't really aware of these issues, and I guess it's because I did not really care, or I was just really in the safe blanket na hindi naman ito mangyayari sa akin. But it's kind of the thing na dapat ma-improve talaga yung ating justice system and yung law enforcement, pati na rin yung health sectors. Kasi hindi naman kailangan na mangyari yan sa akin para mag-care. So, it's nice na ito yung naging topic natin. Because it's important to me as well because I'm a woman. So, that is the end of my report, I think. And I will give the floor to my member, to the other member. Thank you.
So, good afternoon. I'm Medico-Legal, and I'm gonna discuss laws that protects women from domestic abuse. Next slide, please. So, the Republic Act 9262, the Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children Act of 2004, it is the law that seeks to address the prevalence of violence against women and their children by their intimate partners like their husband or ex-husband, live-in partner or former live-in partner, boyfriend, girlfriend or ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend, dating partner or former dating partner. What is violence against women and their children under RA 9262? It refers to any act or series of acts committed by an intimate partner, such as husband, ex-husband, live-in partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, fiancé, who the woman had sexual dating relationship. And moreover, under the law, the following acts are considered forms of violence against women and their children. Number one is physical violence. Any act that results in or is likely to result in physical harm or suffering, such as slapping, punching, choking, and beating. Next is sexual violence. Any act that is sexual in nature, whether physical or psychological, that is used to degrade, humiliate, or control the victim. This includes rape, sexual harassment, and prostitutions. Number three is psychological violence, any act that causes mental or emotional harm to the victims, such as verbal abuse, stalking, and intimidation. The law also recognizes economic abuse as a form of violence against women and their children, which include any act that deprives the victim of her economic or financial resources, such as withholding money or preventing the victim from working or pursuing education. And overall, the law seeks to promote gender equality and protect the right and welfare of women and their children in the Philippines, of which result in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, like I said, psychological harm or suffering, economic abuse, including threats of such act, battery, assault, coercion, harassment, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty. Next slide, please. What are medical legal cases? Cases wherever attending doctor after taking history and clinical examination of the patient thinks that some investigation by law enforcing agencies are essentials so as to fix the responsibility regarding the case in accordance with the law of land. A medical certificate for medical legal cases is important for two reasons. First, it serves as a proof of your physical and mental state following the incident. And second, it is evidentiary value in case you decide to bring the matter to the court. A medical legal certificate is useful insofar as the substantiation of your allegation, as well as your claims for compensatory actual and moral damages are concerned. Next slide, please. So next topic is the organization. that is dedicated to helping the victims. Next slide. Support to online gender-based violence survivors. Women had the right to safety and protection at all times, and the Philippines has many mechanisms in place to protect them. Government agencies, such as Philippine Commission on Women, have published hotlines where women can report cases of abuse. This includes number of the law enforcement, the Commission on Human Rights, the Public Attorney Office, as well as the telephone number of WOW service providers. The barangay have WOW desks where survivors in the community can report domestic cases and request for the issuance of the protection order. There are also places that provide temporary shelter for survivors, which are run by both government and non-government organizations or the NGOs, where survivors can go if necessary. Next slide, please. So the role of technology to create a safe place. While technology was used to perpetuate the abuse, technology can serve as a lifeline for vulnerable groups at the same time. FMA has seen young women go on social media to relate their experiences of harassment and abuse, such as the hashtags addressing the issue of harassment and slut shaming online have trended online as safe spaces where young women can air their grievances, report inappropriate behavior, and demand accountability. The Lunas Collective, a volunteer-powered helpline in the Philippines, provides support for survivors of gender-based violence and violence against women and people who may have concerns about family planning. Some organizations have taken to social media or created online channels and forums to provide women the necessary information they needed, including where they can reach out for assistance, especially like Facebook, Google. This is the case for Bantay Bastos, a Facebook page with 10,000 members in counting who are committed to surfacing, tracking down, and reporting exploitative accounts on Facebook, Twitters, and Telegrams where child porn peddlers allegedly proliferate. Another one is the End Rape Culture PH, who with 18,000 followers on Facebook came up with an idea of shedding light on the ways our culture normalizes rape and violence towards women and other vulnerable groups. Next slide, please. So the medical legal services have increasingly been developed worldwide to improve the collection of medical legal evidences and provide better care to victims. These services documents and collects available evidences, such as injuries and semen, in order to corroborate accounts of sexual assault for court of laws. The settings, staff, and protocols of such services operate on different models and are unevenly developed and implemented across within the regions. Any hospital may issue a medical legal certificate. However, police authorities recommend securing one from a public hospital. The reason for this is that in court proceedings, lawyers would normally go to great lengths to impugn the validity of a medical legal certificate issued by a private hospital or clinic. Since a certification issued by a private entity is neither a public nor official record, it is possible that its presentation in the court may be contested on the ground of being an official and private document that may not have been tampered, whether bringing the issue of its genuineness to the surface of consequently delaying the proceedings. In contrast, a medical certificate for medical legal cases issued by any public Philippines hospital is considered an official document. As a result, it cannot be easily impugned in court if it all. Next slide.
Summary. Definition. Medico-legal and application of medical and scientific methods as evidence in a legal case. Number 2, and medical law. Gender-based violence is violence directed against a person because of their gender. Types of violence: domestic violence, physical abuse, psychological abuse, economic abuse, social abuse, human trafficking, sexual harassment, femicide. The effects on health: intimate partner violence. Women are more likely to experience severe victimization. 40% of women compared to the 15% of men report injuries often in the head, neck, or face. The largest differences in the prevalence of health outcomes for women who experience such violence compared to those who do not are in difficulty sleeping, 37.7 versus 21, activity limitations, 35 versus 19.7, chronic pain, 29.8 versus 16.5, frequent headaches, 28.7 versus 16.5. Additionally, other health consequences may also be related to the health-damaging behaviors that victims use to cope, such as smoking, substance abuse, or alcoholism. B. Online gender-based violence can have serious consequences, including psychological distress, negative health impacts, emotional and sexual harms. Number 2. Their privacy. Women also confront the terms that they have lost their privacy now that their personal and sensitive information were leaked online, or distributed and used against them. Damage reputations for disclosing cases. Number 3, on their economic independence. Victims' ability to be economically independent, as it can lead to lost productivity, missed work or school, unemployment, and housing instability. Cases. Number 1, online from 2012 up to June 30, the Foundation for Media Alternatives has mapped 628 cases of online gender-based violence in the Philippines, mostly sourced from media reports. The National Capital Regions, 10 reports, Visayas Region, 7 reports, Central and South Luzon, 7 reports, Mindanao Region, 5 reports, and 1 case reported in Singapore. Survivors aged 30 years and below are more likely to experience online gender-based violence, 47%. Medical legal cases. Cases whenever attending doctor after taking history and clinical examination of the patient thinks that some investigation by law enforcing agencies are essential so as to fix the responsibility regarding the case in accordance with the law of the land, such as injuries due to battery, injuries that have a likelihood of death, injuries due to accidents which can be industrial, vehicular, or others, injuries due to firearms, suspected or evident suicides or homicides, which also include attempts, suspected or evident poisoning or intoxication, cases referred from courts or otherwise in order to determine the age, burns, etc. Role of forensics is to prove some penetration, prove that such penetration occurred without the consent of the victim, and prove the identity of the perpetrator. Forensic evidence can offer evidence, support allegations, address the identity of the perpetrator. Medical legal issues. Number 1, coordination between police, justice, and health sector in cases of sexual assault. Number 2, ideological, institutional, and resource barriers in law enforcement. A. Police as gatekeepers. B. Mistreatment and bias. C. Failure to investigate. D. Pressure for offender/victim reconciliation. E. Rudimentary follow-up for evidence. 3. Ideological, institutional, and resource barriers in health sector. A. Mistreatment and bias. B. Focus on virginity. C. Incomplete and incorrect forensic medical exams. D. Absence of follow-up, particular health and counseling. And E. Refusal to testify or inadequate testimony. 4. Ideological, institutional, and resource barriers in the justice system. A. Training on use of forensic evidence. B. Bias and mistreatment. C. Discriminatory legislation. D. Nature of necessary links between health, police, and justice sectors. Number 5. Issue on resources. Summary of laws. RA 9262, the Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children Act of 2004. This law seeks to address violence against women and children by their intimate partners. These partners may be their husband, ex-husband, live-in partner, boyfriend/girlfriend, fiancé, who the woman had a sexual/dating relationship. Organizations. The Philippines has many mechanisms in place to protect women. The top is the Philippine Commission on Women. Number of law enforcement, CHR, PAO, and VAW service providers are also offered. The following are other organizations dedicated to helping victims: VAW desk in barangays where women can report domestic abuse cases and request for the issuance of a protection order. Government and NGO-run temporary shelters, the Lunas Collective, Bantay Bastos, and End Rape Culture PH. Medico-legal services. Medico-legal services have increasingly been developed worldwide to improve the collection of medical-legal evidence and provide better care to victims. These services document and collect available evidence like injuries and semen in order to corroborate accounts of sexual assault for courts of law. Any hospital may issue a medical legal certificate. A medical certificate for medical legal cases issued by any public Philippine hospital is considered an official document. As a result, it cannot be easily impugned in court, if at all. The woman was made of a rib out of the side of Adam, not made out of his head to rule over him, nor out of his feet to be trampled upon by him, but out of his side to be equal with him, under his arm to be protected, and near his heart to be beloved. Good afternoon. That has been the presentation of Group 6, Medical Legal Issues in Gender-Based Violence Against Women. Thank you for listening po.
Okay na?
Okay na po.